Now feel the power of 8-bit music on this 6th Nintendo Works side story. Something strange and wonderful happened in the year of our Lord 2016. 2 new games launched for Famicom, and a third has just made its debut. These of course were not officially licensed Nintendo releases, so technically they're just new unlicensed cartridges, which on the face of it is nothing particularly special. Unlicensed Famicom carts have been around since 1986, something we'll be looking at in episodes slated for the future. And here in the US, post-launch cartridge releases have become something of a boutique industry, with the likes of Retro USB cranking out physical releases of homebrew games, sometimes quite excellent ones, to go alongside their great clone hardware. However, these 3 Famicom carts, published by a fan collective called Columbus Circle, stand apart from the usual. For one thing, the homebrew scene doesn't seem to exist in the same way for the Famicom market in Japan as it does here for NES owners. Although the Famicom was rife with games of dubious origin and content during the system's life, that seems to have dried up once the sun set on Nintendo's 8-bit empire. I can't say definitively that Columbus Circle's games are the first new Famicom carts to have been released in decades, but that certainly seems to be the case. At the very least, that's how the games are being marketed. And then there's the fact that, well, they are being marketed, at least to a small degree. Columbus Circle actually went through the motions of a proper release for these games, shipping them in reasonably decent volume with a proper box and manual and everything. They showed up in Tokyo electronics stores on launch day and promptly sold out, just as a real game would. Now, granted, you wouldn't mistake these for classic licensed Famicom releases. The boxes are a little too small, a little too flimsy. And the carts are of questionable quality. The plastic shells fit together a little oddly, and the ROMs themselves use cheaply assembled flash components rather than proper integrated circuits. But while they don't play nice with certain original Famicom models, if you can get them up and running, you have in your hands a shiny new Nintendo game. And these are full-fledged works, not the mere ROM hacks that seem to comprise most modern unlicensed releases. In fact, the first of Columbus Circle's releases isn't even really a game. It's unlike any other NES or Famicom release I can think of. With its bright yellow box, 8-bit Music Power is simply a chiptune jukebox. It's essentially an album of NES chiptunes with a built-in NES visualizer. In fact, you can buy the 8-bit Music Power soundtrack on CD, but cartridge is definitely the way to go for this album. And there is technically a game here. At various points during track playback, you're given prompts to play. Though, truth be told, the game component of 8-bit Music Power is its least impressive facet. Each music track has its own game, but they're all just variants on the same concept. Coins fly across the screen while you control a cursor in an attempt to collect a target number of coins. The coin patterns and goals change from song to song, but it's always essentially the same thing, and you'd have to be pretty clumsy to fail. That's okay though, because the game isn't really the point. Rather, you're meant to enjoy the music, and it's some excellent music indeed. 8-bit Music Power includes nearly a dozen different original compositions by Japanese artists, some of whom you may have heard of. By far the biggest name on 8-bit Music Power is Tappy. Yes, that Tappy. Tappy Iwase, the guy responsible for Metal Gear Solid's incredible soundtrack. In fact, scrolling through the included on-cart database, Tappy seems to have performed the lion's share of work here, composing not only an in-game track, but also the menu theme and some other incidental sound elements. There's also Professor Sakamoto, the guy who performs while wearing a Virtual Boy on his face. The music covers a pretty broad range of chiptune styles, from traditional NES rock to more EDM-type work, to the hyperactive tunes of the European demo scene. You can treat 8-bit Music Power as a video jukebox, allowing it to run through its tracks in sequence, at which point it will loop and start over. The card accompanies each tune with a few graphics that alternate and cycle through different color palettes. These visual elements generally consist of bitmap scenery visuals and cute anime-style girls. The lead credit on 8-bit Music Power belongs to an artist by the name of RIKI, whose website reveals he's recently worked on some notable high-profile commercial campaigns. Dig a little further back into his CV though, and you'll find RIKI got his start working on adult-oriented comics. And like a lot of artists who broke into mainstream respectability after starting out in porn, there's still just a tiny hint of smuttiness at the edges of his art, though here it's perfectly benign. To be fair, the art isn't all cute young girls. There's also one drawing of a hideous, angry old man with pronounced nose hair that occasionally cycles in. This being an NES cart though, there's only so much memory capacity for full-screen illustrations, so the material repeats about halfway through the track listing. More interesting is the mixer mode that allows you to dynamically tweak the music. It's fairly limited in its capabilities, there's no room for adjusting volume or pitch here, but you can activate and deactivate individual channels at will. If you've ever wondered what a square or triangle wave ever sounded like, or what the noise channel was used for on NES, here's your chance to find out. Like the rest of 8-bit Music Power, the channel customization amounts to a frivolous novelty, but it's a fun one. For those who prefer more traditional video game experiences, Columbus Circle's second release will likely have more appeal. Called Kira Kira Star Night DX or Glitter Star Night Deluxe, it's a proper video game. It's a simple one to be sure, but it's addictive and fun and quite nicely made. Glitter Star Night carries over RIKI's vivid visual style and the brilliant music of 8-bit Music Power, much of it also composed here by Tappy, and it applies it to an endless runner-style action game. Glitter Star Night is a proper indie game designed to work within the limitations of the NES. I saw it demoed several years ago at Tokyo Game Show. I was told the developers wanted to release a Famicom cartridge of it, but I assumed that was going to be a gimmick like the press-only carts Capcom put together for Mega Man 9 and DuckTales Remastered. But no, sloppy workmanship aside, Glitter Star Night is a proper Famicom cart that runs on the actual hardware. And it features some of the slickest visuals and music I've ever seen on the system. In terms of content, it's an incredibly limited game. You control a young girl, yeah, RIKI was the lead visual designer on this one too, who dashes through an auto-scrolling cityscape attempting to collect falling stars. The stars fall in patterns, which quickly grow more complex and erratic. With each level of the game, you need to gather up a fixed number of stars in order to advance to the next round. Fail to hit the target and it's a merciless game over. The only move in your heroine's repertoire is to jump, but it's a pretty versatile jump for an 8-bit game. You can jump at 2 different heights, straight up and forward. Jumping has a Ghosts and Goblins style physics restriction, but here it's carefully tuned to allow you to snag everything you see, if you know the patterns. Jumping is something of a commitment here, so you can't leap around haphazardly and expect to succeed. Glitter Star Night has only 2 game modes. Mode A gives you a blinking indicator of where each new set of stars will appear on screen, while the expert-only Mode B uses the same patterns but offers no visual heads-up, making it suitable only for people who have memorized the game's patterns, which are the same every time. It's a pure score attack, a challenge to see how far you can advance before screwing up, and its simple design belies its quality. The graphics, while repetitive, look absolutely beautiful, and the music is every bit as good too. With Tappy once again taking on the lion's share of writing duties. It's by far the most impressive looking and sounding posthumous release I've ever seen for the NES or Famicom, and it has the added benefit of being fun to play, too. Both 8-Bit Music Power and Glitter Star Night cost about $40 a piece, and while released in limited quantities last year, should be available for about retail price if you're willing to look around. Thankfully, the third entry in the series, 8-Bit Music Power Final, launched in Japan at the beginning of April and should be no trouble at all to track down. 8-Bit Music Power Final, as the name suggests, offers up a substantially refined take on the original 8-Bit Music Power. It carries forward some of the same tunes as last year's cartridge, while adding quite a few new compositions, bringing the track listing from 11 to 18. Among the new inclusions are a piece by Minami Matsumae, the composer of the original Mega Man and Sunsoft classics like Trip World. The album also ends with a work by Zune, the guy behind the sprawling Toho empire. And when I say album, I really mean it. Rather than include some obligatory game mode this time, Final consists entirely of a music visualizer. You can skip through tracks, set it to loop or repeat, and once again fuss with the audio channels. But ultimately, the goal this time is to listen to music. The visualizer is less dynamic this time around, but I personally like it better. Rather than flashing between bitmap scenery and large, clumsily drawn character illustrations, the entire experience involves little sprite-based dancers bopping around on top of shifting scenery. The overall aesthetic has a lot in common with Glitter Star Night Deluxe, and it looks great, even if it's fairly simplistic. But the appeal of this package is in the music, so it works out. This is a fun and worthwhile addition to a collector's library. While the sloppy build quality of the games does leave something to be desired, all three carts make fantastic curios if you can get them up and running. I have no idea if Columbus Circle has anything up its collective sleeve beyond 8-Bit Music Power Final, but I absolutely will be on board for it if so.